Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video essay on the channel. Today I am following up on my previous video essay on the first Mass Effect game with a discussion about its sequel. Mass Effect 2 is often regarded as the best game in the series so far, and today I wanted to discuss what makes the game so great. This video essay focuses primarily on the story missions. Character-based missions, which is a bulk of the game, are not discussed in depth here. I would like to talk about the characters themselves in separate future videos, so I've left them out for this video. Of course, as always, spoilers ahead for Mass Effect 2 and also Mass Effect 1, so please, as I said before, go and play these games before you watch this video. With that said, let us begin and dive straight in to a very dramatic prologue. The prologue wipes the slate clean from the first game in some ways. It's clear that BioWare wanted to add a greater cast of characters and develop existing characters such as Rex on different paths. Not to mention create a bigger and better ship. The easiest way to do that was by destroying the ship. It took me a while to get over that very opening cutscene for the first time I played through. It's incredibly dramatic and I was sucked straight back into the action and reminded of what made the first game so compelling, and that this game was going to follow on from that beautifully. Mass Effect 2 then thus reflects a duality of both continuity from the first game and difference. The prologue alone is proof of this. Dialogue is still the lead of the story. It is laid out in exactly the same way and still follows the spectrum of Paragon and Renegade, as in the first game. There is also that continuity in theme. It is clear from the opening that action, politics and comedy are still all a part of the game. Your actions still have consequences and feel like they have weight, and that there is still a diverse cast of main characters. They are still the focus of the storytelling. It continues the theme from the first game of pairing the player and Shepard together. As I mentioned in my Mass Effect 1 video, space capitalism was critiqued, and this is still critiqued in the second game. Shepard's relationship with Cerberus is an example of that critique. Cerberus themselves are the biggest space capitalists out there. The story arc itself is also very similar. It feels a lot like gathering information about an unknown enemy and then building your squad to take down your adversary at the end. While on the other side, it really represents a difference from the previous game. The game has literally, as I said before, wiped the slate clean to make room for these big changes. You now have a chance to change Shepard's appearance and class if you were unhappy with the first game. The ship itself is bigger and better, and so is the crew. Even more characters to interact with. The Elusive Man now replaces the Council as the adversarial boss that Shepard doesn't always get along with. The setup of the story is also fundamentally different. This time you've been rebuilt from death and are expected to work from someone that you clearly, both as a character and a player, do not trust. However, with so much at stake, humanity on the line, it doesn't feel like the player or Shepard themselves have a choice in the matter. This is what needs to be done. As previously mentioned, you also have this new cast of characters, and whilst they are just as diverse, if not more diverse than the first game, they represent a stark difference for Shepard and the player, who now have to get to know a new range of people and understand their perspectives, their history, and how they view the galaxy. This is really significant because the story itself is viewed through the lens of character and dialogue, as we discussed with the first game. And having a cast of new main characters changes that framing and understanding of the story completely. This game in particular is very character-led. As I said before, a majority of the missions are recruitment of characters and gaining their loyalty, and so a lot of what you play through in the game is viewing things through a character lens. The drama of the prologue therefore represents the continuity and difference that is required from a middle entry of any game series. This game needed to both build on the previous game, but also clean the slate enough to introduce characters and build stories of its own to add to the rich lore and backstory of the Mass Effect universe. The opening mission on Freedom's Progress is almost a secondary prologue mission, and it interlinks very nicely and by introducing the new enemy and setting out Shepard's task and the difficulty of it. The Collectors, who are the new enemy, I find particularly creepy, certainly more creepy than the Geth that came before. Vitor is able to give you an understanding through your conversation with him at the end of the mission of how the human colonies are being abducted, without any signs of struggle, through the Seeker swarms. The mission itself on Freedom's Progress is not a particularly long one. It really continues this theme of past versus present. The most notable example of this is actually from towards the end of the level itself, when Tali and Miranda have their difference of opinion on how a traumatized Vitor should be handled, whether he should go back to the flotilla with Tali, or brought in by Cerberus for questioning. Tali's cutting comment, "If you choose to side with her," is a signal of the tension between past and present in the game, and her presence on Freedom's Progress is clever to invoke these internal discussions within the player and also with Shepard. Following the conclusion of the mission, you speak once again with the Elusive Man. Within the conversation with him, he provides you a crucial context for the missions ahead, but you still feel like he's holding something back. This is how his character is designed, and this continues his adversarial role that was previously occupied by the Council. He only really provides you with the basics of your mission, that you need to form a team, here are some dossiers to go and find specific squad members, and you need to head through the Omega-4 relay, and the fact is that no ship has ever returned. Continuing the theme of old and new, he provides you intel on all of your former squad mates. Shepard is understandably keen to get his old allies back on side, but the Elusive Man is quick to provide you with reasons against each of them, and so it becomes clear that a new team must be built, and this is what takes up the majority of the game. Building the team and earning their loyalty. Then it's time for a returning character, focusing again on past. Joker reintroduces himself. He continues the theme. He returns and he explains why he joined Cerberus. The Alliance and the Council, in the 2 years since Shepard's death, have swept everything to do with the Reapers under the rug. And so Joker, similarly to Shepard in some ways, has become a part of Cerberus to do something about it and to take action. Now when I say that, Shepard didn't necessarily have too much of a choice. He literally died. But in being brought back to life, he had an option to not, but he chose to take action because that's the way that their character is built. Joker may be part of the past, but with him comes the reveal of the new ship, equipped with its personal computer, elevator, and other great upgrades from the first game. Not to mention the onboard AI, Edie, who develops into such a core character for the series, and I think a fan favourite character. The ship redesign I think is really well done, and it feels like such an upgrade to the previous game, and I think to some extent that was only achievable likely due to the upgrades in technology in between the first game and the second game's release. We come from 2007 for the first game to 2010 for the second game. Freedom's Progress, therefore, and the introductions that follow it are the true start of the game. But they continue the key theme of past and present that persists through the game. The tension between the two is an internal battle that in time Shepard and the player will have over the course of the rest of the game. Whilst this mission also introduces the new creepy enemy of the Collectors and the creepy way in which they abduct human colonists, and also sets out the challenge ahead and provides questions that the player is invested to go and answer, such as why are they targeting humans? Before I talk about the next main mission on Horizon, I really wanted to use a section just to talk about the recruitment and loyalty missions in general, as well as talk a bit about the worlds themselves that you visit when you're going to complete these missions. My first comment really of note is on the recruitment and loyalty missions in general. As we've established, there is a theme between past and present, continuity and difference. And the recruit and loyalty missions really exemplified that. The recruit missions themselves focus on the circumstances to get a character to join you now. Whereas, by contrast, I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this, loyalty missions often focus on the past and the past trauma of the character, building that character to supplement the conversations that Shepard will have with the crew during the time on the Normandy. This is about closing and dealing with that trauma and issue and moving on so that they then can focus on the present. The missions then within themselves therefore represent the theme of past and present throughout the entire game. They are an example of it. What I love about this game is that each world you visit to complete missions, there are unique dialogue triggers for certain characters to talk about the world. It continues the theme of the first game and the feature of the first game of contextual advice, and that knowledge is provided by other main characters. In this case, you can trigger it yourself rather than it being an automated thing like it was in the first game. And we'll come on to some of the specific things that are said in a moment when I talk about the different worlds. I think the game also does really well to discuss and cover important topics and plot points that are going to appear later. For example, there is a huge discussion around the Geth versus the Quarians in Tali's mission and loyalty mission, and also with Mordin discussions around the genophage, and if you talk to him specifically you find out a lot more information. Moving on to talk about the world specifically, I'd like to start with Omega. It's the first place you're likely to visit, and it's clear that it's under the dictatorial rule of Aria. It's clearly a hub for criminals to come and attempt to get away from those chasing them or pursuing them, and a bit of a murk paradise. The atmosphere to me feels a lot like a kind of neon criminal underworld. It's the place you need to go to get Mordin on side, and he becomes a very key character for the rest of it. It also reintroduces Garrus, and it's the first time that Shepard and the player will see a familiar face from the previous game, which is a bit of a relief for Shepard. Both suit Omega well as places for you to meet them for the first time, because they act as a good light in a very dark and dangerous place. Mordin by curing a plague, and Garrus by eliminating mercs. Next, I'd like to move on to talk about Ilium, mostly because of the contrast of similarities and differences between Omega and Ilium. Ilium, on the face of it, looks nothing like Omega. In fact, it's much more clean, much more how best to say it, much more clean and much more posh. But it really is just a hub for space capitalism. As I mentioned before, in ambient dialogue, Garrus' summary of Ilium is that it is as dangerous as Omega if you sign the wrong contract or join the wrong company. So on face value, it's a beautiful planet, but underneath there is this horrific slave trade, and one wrong move can land you in a lot of trouble and make you disappear almost as it can in Omega, but for different reasons. Because of the presence of corporations, of course it's a great place to reintroduce Gianna Parasini, who you can help in a couple of quests with her. It's also where you meet the Rachni Asari messenger, were you to save the Rachni in the first game, showing another consequence of your actions from the first game, as well as meeting Shiala, who is the Zeus Hope Asari from the first game. You also will get to see Liara, and see the difference in her character, as she is now an agent of the Shadow Broker, and pursue the route down the DLC. Next, I'd like to contrast the Citadel. The Citadel is somewhere where you don't actually have to spend too much time compared to the previous game, where you go there 3 different times, and you can go there more if you want to in the first game. You can obviously visit the Citadel in the second game as many times as you need to, but for actual missions there are less. As you can see from your arrival there the first time, a lot has changed since the attack. There are now more humans. Bailey is now a CSEC captain, and Anderson is present on the council, of course, as your choice at the end of the game, or Udina if you were to choose him. From meeting with them, it's the same old council. They are still denying the Reaper's existence, but you can get your Spectre status back. The Thane loyalty mission really shows that the increase in human activity on the Citadel and human presence within the galaxy has had its impacts. As a popular politician in the Zakera ward is campaigning on an anti-human policy, showing that not all species are happy for the humans to have more power. Tuchanka really is a planet that only the Krogan could survive on. By contrast to all of the other planets and space stations I've mentioned before, it has been utterly destroyed as a result of the Krogan nuclear warfare, even prior to their uplift by the Solarians. Grunt actually comments upon his arrival on the planet that even his tank was better than this, and he can't believe that it's the planet of a list of great Krogan that he has been taught about. Rex also returns onto Tuchanka, and you see that he is now the leader of Clan Erdnot, and he is trying his best to reunite the clans. This is obviously providing that he survived the attack on Vermeer. The final place I want to talk about isn't actually a hub, world, or station per se. It's actually a place you only visit once, and it kind of follows on from my point on Ilium. And that's Purgatory. It's the place that you go to release Jack from cryo prison. It's a critical example of space capitalism, something that is constantly examined through this game and the previous game. Warden Curiel is buying and selling prisoners for profit. He is extorting planets and selling prisoners for high prices to customers who will abuse them. He is essentially a slave trader, and he tries to trade Shepard. That really concludes my summary of the story missions in between the main missions. The recruitment, the loyalty, and all of the different planets and space stations. There are many others that you can visit outside of that, and I have not covered them all, but I just wanted to talk about these few as an example, and because I think they're the most interesting ones to talk about. So with that, we're going to move on now, back to the main missions, and talk about Horizon. Horizon once again continues the theme of blending old and new, as the game allows you to finally fight the Collectors directly. This also reinforces how creepy the Collectors are. The opening cutscene to this level with the swarms is quite jarring, and fighting them in the game can be quite difficult. They introduce several different monstrous enemies, and from a gameplay standpoint it makes a really good difference from the merc and mech based recruitment levels players will have just been completing over and over. Later in the level there is a returning enemy from the first game in the terms of the Husks. These are essentially humanoid Reapers. They were one of the creepiest elements from the first game, and their return is further evidence of Reaper involvement with the Collectors. During the level, the Collector General, who will also assume direct control of individual Collectors, and he often refers to Shepard by name, talking about salvation. This clearly mirrors what Shepard discussed previously in the first game with Sovereign, indicating that once again the Reapers are clearly involved with the Collectors in some way. There is a distinct tension between the Alliance and Cerberus that ramps up a lot in this particular level, and this is also as a result of the presence of your former squad mate, either Ashley Williams or Caden Alenko. Regardless of who lived on Vermeer, both do not trust Cerberus and berate the player, and also Shepard of course, for allying with them, even if the cause ultimately is just. For Shepard as a character, I feel that this is a very internal conflict that he has going on. Shepard's character is always one that wants to take action. This feeds into his ability to explode and destroy things, but also means that he does not really like waiting around for decision makers and pen pushers to allow him to do something, hence his adversarial role with the Council and now the Elusive Man. This trait is also present in the character of Garrus, and I think this is why he was the perfect character to join Shepard, or at least join Shepard first, in both games. So on the one hand you have this need in Shepard's character to stop the bad guys at all costs, and on the other hand you have the Alliance soldier in Shepard. Before his death, Shepard had spent nearly his whole life in the Alliance pretty much, regardless of what backstory you chose, and so his allegiance is naturally strong even if he doesn't always agree with their decisions and the fact that they swept the Reapers under the rug. This tension is directly shown in the Horizon mission. In this case, Ashley or Caden, depending on who is alive, represents the past and Shepard represents the present. Both in this level are balanced. The whole level also shows the naturally distrusting nature of humans. Delan, the mechanic, doesn't trust the Alliance at all. But you have Ashley or Caden representing the Alliance who don't trust Cerberus at all. They parallel each other. Following the conclusion of the mission, the Elusive Man admits to leaking that you are now with Cerberus, and this caused the Alliance to send your former ally, either Ashley or Caden, to Horizon, which in turn caused it to be targeted by the Collectors as they are looking for those with a connection to Shepard. This once again stresses the adversarial side of the Elusive Man, and to an extent proves Ashley or Caden's point. Cerberus are not to be trusted. He has essentially used a colony as bait to prove his theory, leading to half of the colony being abducted. The Elusive Man's argument, which is consistent through the remaining levels of the game also, is that the ends justify the means, but to Shepard and the player, sometimes it is too much, or too much is being put on the line to get information. The Elusive Man also makes it clear that Shepard and the crew need to be in the right frame of mind to go through the Omega-4 relay, as it is likely that they will not come back from this mission. This kicks off the loyalty missions, with various members of the crew, not to mention several new dossiers to recruit new members. Horizon acts in some ways as Shepard's loyalty mission, as it effectively ends any previous relationship, friendship or otherwise, with Ashley or Caden respectively, with the aim of clearing Shepard's head in order to proceed and focus on the mission. The next main mission sees you board a collector ship that has apparently been disabled by a Turian patrol. This feels particularly hard to believe, but again the Elusive Man provides you with a distinct lack of information ahead of your mission, only that you're trying to find information about the Omega-4 relay and how to pass through safely. The collector ship itself is once again a very incredibly creepy setting. There are no collectors around, but instead human remains and discarded pods similar to those you saw on Horizon. The atmosphere as a result of this is once again similar of that to a horror movie. It's very eerily quiet. This mission includes several core revelations that are critical for the story, as the squad and Edie are allowed access to key systems within the collector ship, and so can gain knowledge of their purpose. After a time, Shepard finds evidence of tests the collectors have been running on themselves. Edie processes this information, and the revelation is made that the collectors were actually Protheans, and the Reapers have genetically altered them and bent them to their will, thus showing the fate that those enslaved by the Reapers face. Shepard aptly comments that in some ways this is a fate that is worse than death, and it would be better to be killed. Following this, there is the revelation that this collector ship is also the one that destroyed the original Normandy 2 years ago, leading to Shepard's death. As Joker says in this moment, something doesn't add up, and the lack of any sign of struggle or death of collectors or otherwise are all signalling both to Shepard and the player that this mission seems like a trap. As I said, the player will sense this too, but there is little choice other than to go deeper and deeper into the ship to find this valuable information, which is required to proceed with Shepard's mission. Once you reach the terminal and Edie is connected, the trap is sprung and the squad is finally attacked. Edie really proves her worth and usefulness in this mission by being able to scrub the virus out of the system and getting the information the team required to pass through the relay. In doing so, she also discovers the revelation that the Turian message originated from the Collectors. As you now know, it was a trap, but that the Elusive Man definitely knew that it was a trap, but still sent Shepard and the crew in without telling them. This betrayal to Shepard, and to the player as well, feels similar to the Council's betrayal from the last game, and feeds the idea that the Elusive Man has replaced the Council as the secondary adversarial character in this game. After the mission is concluded, Shepard has the opportunity to confront the Elusive Man, who admits that he knew, but it explains his reasoning. The reasoning is mainly that they achieved a good result in getting key information regarding the Omega-4 relay and how to get through it. His argument essentially is, once again, that the ends justify the means, like with Horizon, and that he knew Shepard would survive. To me, this seems like an unnecessary risk of an asset that he spent 2 years and a lot of money to bring back to life. But that's just me. I'm sure there would be an alternative solution. While Shepard eventually accepts the Elusive Man's reasoning, it is more difficult for the player to, in some ways. It does feel like the lies could definitely have been avoided, and the relationship between the Elusive Man and Shepard, also the player, is permanently tainted as a result. It makes the dramatic split at the end of the story make much more sense, and gives it much more weight, as there is just no trust left by that point between the two, between the Elusive Man and Shepard, mostly due to the Elusive Man's actions and his general character, which by the way is very strong character writing because it's very, very consistent and balanced very, very nicely. For now, the team understands that a friend-foe system is used to get through the Omega-4 relay, and the decision of the player now is whether to go and get this immediately or to continue building up the team. This decision really sets up the end of the game and can alter how prepared you are to pass through the relay. But like with many of the Mass Effect 1 decisions, it's left pretty open to the player how to play, and they only have the context they have at the time. So depending on how you choose to act from this point can drastically alter the story, which is a really interesting and good part of this game. That your decisions and choices have impacts on how the game will conclude. Following the mission on the Collector's ship, it is clear that the one thing that the team requires to get through the Omega-4 relay is the Reaper IFF. Eventually, a mission on the derelict Reaper becomes available, and it is one that returns heavily to the theme of indoctrination in the series. The science team that you're supposed to make contact with when you arrive were all indoctrinated to sacrifice themselves on an altar of spikes, used to turn them into husks that we've seen in the first and the second games. This all but confirms the Collector's involvements with the Reapers, as they've been using the husks to fight you throughout the whole game. Once again, the whole setting is dark and gloomy, providing another creepy element to it, and one that seems inspired by space horrors such as Alien. The mission itself also introduces a new character to the team, an independent Geth who helps the squad during the mission only to be incapacitated right at the end. The choice is then Shepard's on whether to or not to activate the Geth, just as it was Shepard's decision on whether or not to release Grunt from his tank. Like with Grunt, I think it's always worth activating Legion. They are one of my favourite characters. Legion also provides a unique insight during the game and on missions, as well as being an impactful character in the Geth versus Quarian dynamic. I'd really think it was a great decision on the developers and writers' part to include a squad mate who is the same as the enemy from the previous game. Think of how many Geth you were killing. It's really another representation of the game's fixation between old and new, and the discussions with Legion are really, really impactful and interesting. The Reaper IFF mission ultimately feels like a prelude to the final assault on the Collector base. Even on the easiest difficulty, the sheer number of tough enemies put in front of you makes this level incredibly difficult. The IFF really is the final piece of the puzzle to what the story's been building to, and it's the final thing you require for the Omega-4 relay. The end is now in sight, both for the player and Shepard, as well as Shepard's squad. The next critical thing that happens in the story is that the Collectors invade while the squad is away from the ship, and kidnap the entire crew, except for Joker. And it forces the player, and Shepard of course, into a decision. Do you go through the relay now to save the crew, or wait and build your team further, but only if you haven't obviously already? The impact of this can decide who lives or dies, and has implications for the next game as well, both in terms of which characters appear, but also if characters survive. This section is the only time I can recall not playing as Shepard in Mass Effect. You instead play as Joker, who unshackles the AI, Edie obviously, to help and save the Normandy. It also includes one of my favourite comedic moments in the entire series.
I have access to the defensive systems. Thank you, Mr. Moreau. Now you must reactivate the primary drive in engineering.
You want me to go crawling through the ducts again?
I enjoy the sight of humans on their knees. That is a joke.
Right.
Then it is time to prepare and complete the mission that this has all been building up to, attacking the collector base and taking them out once and for all. For something that the whole game is built up to, Shepard and the crew have surprisingly little information about what to expect going through the Omega-4 relay. However, the MO for the entire game has really just been to be as prepared as possible for anything that can be thrown at you through this relay. What is incredible in this entire sequence at the start of the end of the game is that your actions have consequences. How well you prepared your team and also the ship are key to whether or not they will survive this mission, or even if you will survive this mission. You can lose squad mates in the opening cutscene alone, so before you even get to influence the gameplay you could be down some key teammates. As with the first game, once again the cutscenes and action in this final attack are incredible, and the game makes use of the entire squad for the finale really well, which is something I think that the first game slightly missed, and is definitely something that's ignored in the final game. Shepard must make some very key decisions, and the outcomes shape the mission, makes the whole mission feel very, very impactful, and all of those decisions feel very impactful, and that Shepard and the player can make a real difference to the outcome, not just of this mission, but of the entire game. Of course, as with everything in video games, there is a specific formula to make sure that everyone survives. And it's one that I have personally memorised ever since my first playthrough went horribly, horribly wrong, and I lost most of my squad. A first-time player is at the mercy of their own naive decisions, and that is one of the strengths of any game like this. But this feels particularly impactful in the Mass Effect series as a whole. I think this is particularly because of the legacy of decisions that will lead into the final game. The game does really well to start by framing the mission as one with a one-way trip, crash landing you on the collector base and then putting round after round of obstacles in front of you to try and get through to the final boss. How you respond and act and the choices you make throughout determine your outcome. In the final confrontation, you are facing a very daunting enemy, a humanoid Reaper, a huge superstructure. I think the game designers absolutely knocked it out of the park with how horrible it looks. After it drops down into the abyss, Shepard will have a final choice to make, and he will be contacted by the Elusive Man. The decision is to destroy or save the collector base. This is the final major tension point with the Elusive Man, especially if you wish to destroy it, as I definitely did wish to. This mirrors the tension that had been building in the first game with the Council right up until the point where you decide whether you want to save them or not. In this game it's destroy or save the collector base, and it's instead the Elusive Man. And it's really the boiling point of tensions that have been building throughout the game through your conversations with the Elusive Man, and the lack of trust that you have in him that has built to this boiling point with him. If you do decide to destroy the base and survive the mission, then in your final chat, the game shows you that the Elusive Man is now an enemy, and sets up the final game with a showcase of both him and the Reapers. Unlike the Council before him, therefore, the Elusive Man actually transitions from an adversarial character, into a true enemy that will be carried into the next game. To conclude, this game does really, really well to build upon the first game, but also set up and create storylines for the third game. It utilises its continuity in themes and the overall enemy of the Reapers, and uses difference by presenting a new adversary to fight and defeat along with a new crew and ship. The space horror inspiration of the game is still as clear as it was in the previous, alongside the clear influences from Star Trek and Star Wars that are absolutely glaringly obvious. The game acts as a bridge between the first and the third game, but it is also just so much more than that. It is probably, arguably, the best game in the entire series. The story from a standalone perspective is probably my favourite, and is the strongest of the whole series. The final mission lives up to that billing too, and is also the best of the lot in my opinion. It keeps what was so strong about the first game, the dialogue and the focus on character building to lead the story and unison of Shepard and the player. Every choice, conversation and action feels impactful, and it continues the perfect blend of action, comedy and politics that is all rolled together into the bundle that we call Mass Effect. The characters are once again incredibly relatable, and ones that players and fans continue to hold dear as they were in the first game. And this blend of new and old crewmates was a perfect mix, a great mix of characters and a real diverse range, again opening up dialogues with new and different peoples. Even the adversarial character of the Elusive Man is a key example of such a strong character-led story. Ultimately, this game is a more ambitious and better version of the first game. That doesn't mean that the first game is bad, it is really, really good. It's great because of how good it is under the limitations. But this game is great because without those limits, it manages to expand and become bigger and better. Therefore, to properly conclude my thoughts here, Mass Effect 2 is a brilliant game, and a great example of a successful second game in the trilogy, as well as another great example of a dialogue-led and character-led story. That's all I have for you today, so I really hope you've enjoyed and found this video entertaining and insightful. I will be covering Mass Effect 3 in a video essay in time, but as it's a much bigger game, it may be a bit later than these two that have come out so soon after each other. If you do have any comments, feedback or suggestions, as always, please leave them in the comment section below. And check out my other videos. I've done video essays on Mass Effect 1, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and The Witcher 3, as well as a few other sprinklings of other bits of content in between. So once again, please leave a like if you'd enjoyed it, subscribe if you would like to stick around to see more of what I'm going to be making. I'm trying to upload every week if possible. And yeah, please like if you enjoyed, and see you next time. Peace.